Hello everyone, it's me again, and it's time for another thrilling edition of Comics and Cocktails, where I drink more alcohol than I rightfully need at, I don't know what time it is on a Wednesday night, and talk about comics. So I come to you from a new location today, because I just moved in with my girlfriend, and I still have issues with having good lighting. I'll try to sort the situation out. So, today's beverage is one of these Starbucks thingamajigs, product placement. I'm just kidding, nobody's paying me to do this. With glazed donut flavored vodka in it. I thought they would go well together because donuts and coffee. The end result is pretty tasty, but unbelievably sugary. So, it might go better with straight coffee, but I didn't brew that, so. I was gonna do gin and tonic, but I didn't want to take gin I wasn't allowed to get into. And I've never tried gin and tonic, so for all I know, I could really hate it. So, in lieu of comics today, because I haven't made it to the comic book store in a while, I'm going to do a brief, hopefully, explanation of one of my favorite characters from comics, and that is Yellowjacket. The reason I'm doing this is because I was at Baltimore Comic Con over the weekend. Not Baltimore Comic Con. Awesome Con, which is in DC. And I was cosplaying as Yellowjacket. I'll put links to pictures of that, maybe, in the description, or I'll forget, one of the two. Anyway, and I got a few people getting a little bit confused as to the character of Yellowjacket. So, I thought the best way to clarify was to explain this while drunk. Alright, so, story of Yellowjacket. We started back in, the 70s. Because Hank was on the Avengers, and he was like, I need to propose to Jen one day. And Jen was like, why won't Hank propose to me? Obviously, I'm the one driving this relationship because I'm the one who knows what they want. But I am confined to 70s gender norms and must wait for him to propose. And Hank was like, why won't I propose? And then he was in his lab, and boom, science happened. So then Yellowjacket strolls up to the Avengers. The explanation there is it was a combination of Pym particles and chemicals that basically just made Hank develop an alter identity and pull a costume out of his ass, which, I mean, I guess you can kind of tell that he pulled this costume out of his ass, because who comes up with these shoulder fins? I'm just kidding, I love the shoulder fins. And Yellowjacket is my bae. He's an asshole, though. So, Yellowjacket, who you kind of have to treat as a separate identity from Hank. You can't just, assume that Yellowjacket and Hank are one and the same, because they're really, really not. Yellowjacket acts entirely different from Hank. If you're at all familiar with dissociative identity disorder, think of it like that. They call it schizophrenia in the comics, but this was written in the 70s. And at the time, schizophrenia was kind of a catch-all term for your brain is confusing us, and we're not going to take the time to actually sort this out right now. And then people started calling it multiple personality disorder, and now it's called dissociative identity disorder. Relatedly, dissociative fugue, which is kind of, from a psychological standpoint, you want to look at it like this. Yellowjacket started out as a dissociative fugue, that later developed into full DID, depending on how much writers wanted to acknowledge that this was a thing. So, anyway, Yellowjacket strolls up to the Avengers, and he's like, yo, I killed Hank Pym. Make me an Avenger. Which was probably not the best resume to turn in to become an Avenger. I might be talking too loud. I don't want to wake people up. And the Avengers were like, hell no. And so he was like, okay, well, fuck you guys. And he takes Jan to his secret base, which is actually just like a little tree house that's like, you know, like a microscopic tree house. Not microscopic. A little bit bigger than microscopic. Uh-oh. Did I wake someone up? Okay, so he takes Jan to his little miniature tree house. And he's like, I love you. And she's like, you're a freak. And he's like, but I love you. And he kisses her. And she's like, whoa, I know these lips. And she's like, she realizes it's Hank. And so she marries him like he wants her to. And all the Avengers are like, literally, what the fuck, Jan? And she's like, don't worry, guys, I got this. And then the Serpent Society attacks. And, you know, and Jan's in danger, so Hank snaps out of it, and he's like, I'll save you, Jan. And then she's like, well, hi, Hank. And he's like, hi. So, I just had, like, this identity crisis, and now we're married, and I'm okay with that. And so they just stayed married. And probably not the best way to marry someone, but that's what happened. And then, so Hank goes into this weird period where he goes by Yellowjacket, like, costume-wise, but he doesn't really act like Yellowjacket as much. Then you get into the late 70s / early 80s, I don't remember which one, into the Trial of Yellowjacket arc, which I feel like he goes back and forth between the two identities during that one a bit. And this is where you get the famous panel of Hank and Jan, where Hank slaps Jan. And that's a bad thing to do. Don't do that. And this is like the reputation that stuck. More with Yellowjacket than Hank himself. Because most people, you know, it stuck more with Yellowjacket. It stuck with Hank too, but it stuck a lot more with Yellowjacket. Because that was the costume he was wearing. And there's a lot of context that a lot of people ignore in that panel. I'm not going to explain it right now because I feel like that's a topic better explained sober. Because I could tell you a lot about it, just not real while drunk. So you get the Trial of Yellowjacket arc. And then Hank goes to the West Coast Avengers, and he puts away the Yellowjacket identity for a while because he feels like it's too volatile, it's too much associated with bad things, like hitting Jan. And so, you don't see a whole lot of Yellowjacket until, like, after West Coast Avengers, I think. And then there's this weird period, and, like, for a while, Hank kind of switches back and forth between Giant Man. And he, like, in the beginning, whenever Hank changed names, it was very important and had a lot of weight to it. But then, like, after West Coast Avengers and in, like, the late 80s and 90s, he kind of just, like, switched around a bit randomly. And during this time, he went by Yellowjacket without really acting like Yellowjacket. And he also went through a phase, I forget when this was, because comics. He went through a phase where oh no, I do know when this was. This was in the 2000s. I haven't gotten there yet. So, anyway. At one point, Yellowjacket and Hank are split into two different bodies. And this is more of the treating them like separate identities. Because some of the writers don't treat them like separate identities, which is annoying because they are. And that ended up with them going to this magic guy. And, like, they're like, hey, because the two bodies were fading because they weren't connected. And they're like, hey, you need to fuse us again. And he's like, yeah, sure. So they go into this dreamscape. And Yellowjacket and Hank are talking. And then they realize that they need a third element in there. Oh, it's actually Yellowjacket and Goliath talking. They make a distinction between Hank and Goliath there, too. More for simplicity's sake than for an actual distinction. And so Jan goes in there, and then Yellowjacket and Goliath fight over Jan a lot. And then Jan's like, oh, I'm not the missing part of you. And so she gets out of there. And then, like, Dr. Pym comes out and he's like, sup. And then he, like, unites the three parts. And then Hank's like, I am whole through magic. If only real recovery for DID was this easy. And it's not. And I could go into a really long discussion about DID, because I am a psychology major. You might not know that. I think is that all on my YouTube page? I don't know. So anyway, and you don't see a lot of Yellowjacket after that in, like, main canon. There was Avengers Forever, which is probably the best writing for, like, Yellowjacket's personality and Yellowjacket's interaction with everybody else ever. It was a 12-issue series written by Kurt Busiek, and basically they plucked Avengers from different points in the timeline to fight King the Conqueror. No, they were fighting Immortus with King the Conqueror, and Immortus is King the Conqueror from the future, so yeah. It was weird. Like, King the Conqueror is weird, but it was a really good story. You should look it up. I'm not going to go into it entirely because, as near as I can tell, Avengers Forever isn't really part of 616 continuity, because almost none of the characters remember that it happened after it happens, because there's a mind wipe thing in time travel. Spoilers! And I think it's shortly after Avengers Disassembled where Critty Knoll, Skrull. Okay, anything from Avengers Disassembled to the end of Secret Invasion, by the way, that's gonna be the Skrull as Hank. None of that is really Hank Pym. But it's during that period, I think, where Yellowjacket decides to go by Yellowjacket because he's like, I committed bad things while under this identity, so I have to face my demons using this name. And Critty Knoll as Hank went by Yellowjacket as a superhero name for like basically all of the time that Critty Knoll was Hank. And then when Hank got back, he went by Wasp instead. And we don't really see anything of the real Yellowjacket in comics at all since then. Briefly, there was a weird thing where Hank showed up in the Yellowjacket costume, but he was part of a weird event that I didn't keep track of. So I couldn't tell you exactly. So, basically, Yellowjacket, alter, product of DID, and he's Hank, but not really. And having somebody else be him in the movie is dumb. The only acceptable substitute for this Yellowjacket is Rita Damara, and I'm not as familiar with her character, unfortunately, but she's really cool, and you should look her up. Maybe I'll do a character study on her later when I get around to like hunting down all of her comics. So that's all I have for today. Hopefully next week I'll be back to talking about like current comics. I know I have a couple of comics that I want to talk about. They're like really indie, they're not even in comic book stores indie, but you can get them online. And that's all. I will see you next time, which will maybe be next week, maybe not. And have a good time. Bye.